but does God benefit when we walk in the light? And if so, how? See, some people have the idea that God is who he is. It is what it is. And it doesn't matter what we do. God doesn't really care. I mean, if you want to live right and go to heaven, great. God will receive you. If you want to live wrong and go to hell, fine. God will damn you and condemn you. But if you live righteous before God, the only person that benefits from that is you. That's what Eliphaz is saying. I'm saying Eliphaz is wrong. And how do we know that he's wrong? So Isaiah 43:7 says, God's created all people for his glory. God created us for his glory. Then Matthew 5:16 says, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, Matthew 5:16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So when we walk in the light and when we do good works, God gets glory. All right, so now I think we're ready for Job 22. Let me get... Job 22, and here's the third cycle of speeches with the friends. So in this third cycle of speeches, we're going to see much of the same that we have seen previously, but just in some different ways. For starters, you get to this point in the book, and I don't know... there's been a resurgence of this kind of talk. It's not new, but you hear more people talking about it these days. And I think it's helpful that you should try to read whole books in one sitting or read as much of a book as you can and not chop Bible books up into little pieces. And I think that's helpful and good. If you do that with the book of Job, if you try to read the whole book of Job through in one sitting or in as few sittings as possible, so say you can only stand 15 chapters and then you take a break or whatever, what's going to happen to you by the time you get to this section is you'll be a little winded with some of the arguments. And it seems like as you read through the book of Job, the friends also are becoming winded because much of the speeches repeat the same information and the speeches become shorter. For example, Bildad's speech is amazingly only going to be 6 verses in verses 1 through 6. We're going to hear from Eliphaz in chapter 22, but Zophar doesn't even make another appearance. So the speeches are shrinking in size. People are running out of things to say. Zophar won't even show up again. The friend's speech has been consistent. Job's speech has been inconsistent. The friends have consistently clung to the retribution principle and the idea that Job is getting what he deserves, even when he's tried to provide evidence to the contrary, even when Job's tried to say, this is not me, you all have mistaken me. While Job's been inconsistent, he says some things about God at times that are amazing, and at other times he says things about God that are just awful. Hey, I know my Redeemer lives and will stand on the earth at the last, Job 19:25. My record is on high, Job 16:19. But then he says, hey, curse the day of my birth, Job 3, and a host of other things. And so we see him wrestling with this. As we work through this section, seems like Job's finally starting to get it. When we look at 22 through 27, then we realize he's not. This will be the last time we hear from the friends in these chapters. But Job's going to keep speaking, as I mentioned at the start of class, until chapter 31. He'll speak of the value of wisdom in chapter 28, his grasp of it, and also strongly and rightly defend his own integrity. After this round of speeches, the friends are done talking. We'll hear from Job, a strange young wise man named Elihu, and then finally, we get to hear from God. So this section is important because we're getting near the end of some of this material. So let's go to Eliphaz in Job 22. I've titled the speech of Eliphaz in Job 22 as Eliphaz plays bad cop and good cop. What is that, bad cop, good cop? Y'all know what that is? Mm-hmm. You ever seen any Law and Order SVU or anything like that? What is bad cop and good cop?
He's trying to play one or the other.
Sometimes in TV shows and movies, somebody will be accused of a crime. Hiram's accused of murder. And the cops will bring Hiram in for interrogation. And they may know I'm guilty or they assume I'm guilty. And they'll have more than one cop to interrogate me with questions. One cop comes in and tries to play nice. Hiram, if you just tell us the truth, we'll give you a deal. You won't go to prison for a long time. Maybe you had to commit this murder. You were angry. I'm sorry. And another cop comes in and he or she is angry and they're just accusing me to my face. You did it. You know you did it. And they want you to respond in wrath. Okay, yeah, I did. And just come out frustrated and say it. So they're trying to use both cops to play on your emotions, whether through sensitivity or through strong emotional rigor that will just eventually get you to tell them what they want to hear. Eliphaz plays both of those parts. He starts out, though, with the bad cop, and then he'll move into the good cop. Let's go to Job 22, though, and see him in action. I'm in verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Timnite answered and said, can a man be profitable to God? Surely he who is wise is profitable to himself. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty if you are right, or is it gain to him if you make your way blameless? Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? Is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities. For you have exalted pledges of your brothers for nothing, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. The man with power possessed the land, and the favored man lived in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless were crushed. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden terror overwhelms you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and a flood of water covers over you. Let's stop there in verse 11. So Eliphaz starts out by talking about humans and their relationship to God. Now look at your Bible and notice Job 22, 1 through 4. He asks several questions. What's his first question?
Man, be profitable unto God.
Basically, do we matter to God at all? Does God care at all about us? He answers, notice what his answer is in verse number 4. He says, can man be profitable to God? That's number 2. Verse 2, surely he who is wise is profitable to himself. That's saying, hey, your goodness, you behaving good, God doesn't get anything from you following the rules. That's for your own good. Look at verse 3. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty or if you are in the right? Or is it gain to him if you make your ways blameless? Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you? And enters into judgment with you. So what is Eliphaz's response? Can a man be profitable to God? What does he say? Can we be profitable to God? Does God care if we're good and well behaved, or do we just do it for our own good? What does Eliphaz say? Eliphaz says what? We're good for who's good? Our good or God?
For our good.
For our good. Yeah, he's saying, hey, Job, you're complaining. You're saying you lived a righteous life and that wicked people are getting away with everything. Can a man be profitable to God? Does God care that you do what you should and that you keep the rules? Hey, if you follow the rules, if you live a righteous life, that's for your benefit, but not for God. God doesn't care about that. That doesn't add anything to God. God doesn't get any benefit from you and me being well behaved. Question: is Eliphaz right or wrong?
He's wrong.
He's dead wrong, Mike. He's dead wrong.
Matter of fact, that's Matthew 5 when we deal with being perfect. And he asked the question, what kind of goodness do we get if man do us right and we praise them, but we get done wrong, we almost basically curse them. To be perfect and mature, to be like God, is to stand upright and to make sure that we hold forth to his wisdom, not to ours. And a lot of Christians struggle with that.
Yeah. But help me out with this, though. Help me out with this. And I think a lot of Christians struggle with this. When Andreas walks in the light, Andreas benefits from that. True?
True.
Yes, your sins will be forgiven. 1 John 1:7. Andreas is like, yeah, that's true. I'm benefiting right now. Yeah, that's right. But does God benefit when we walk in the light? And if so, how? See, some people have the idea that God is who he is. It is what it is. And it doesn't matter what we do. God doesn't really care. I mean, if you want to live right and go to heaven, great. God will receive you. If you want to live wrong and go to hell, fine. God will damn you and condemn you. But if you live righteous before God, the only person that benefits from that is you. That's what Eliphaz is saying. I'm saying Eliphaz is wrong. And how do we know that he's wrong? How do we know that God derives some benefit? That this question that he poses in 22:2, where he says, can a man be profitable to God? The answer is yes. He says, hey, if it's wise for a person, surely he who is wise is profitable to himself. Eliphaz is saying, nope, it's just about you. God doesn't care. How do we know Eliphaz is wrong, though?
Because Jesus said, let your light so shine before men that it will glorify your Father which art in heaven.
Okay, so God gets some glory. I got Isaiah 43:7 in mind, but Matthew 5:16 is the Isaiah 43:7 of the New Testament, right? So Isaiah 43:7 says God's created all people for his glory. God created us for his glory. Then Matthew 5:16 says, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, Matthew 5:16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So when we walk in the light and when we do good works, God gets glory. But why else or how else do we know that it matters to God how we live?
Well, he sent his son for us to the world.
Yes, and y'all are in the new, and I appreciate the New Testament application, but like before even you get to the New Testament, how do we know that how people live matters to God? There's one like shortcut answer right in the book of Job. And then there's like other stuff in the Bible that says God cares about how we behave. How do we know? And how does Job's situation prove that God cares about how we behave? The whole book of Job is really about what?
About how God offered up his servant because of his behavior.
Exactly. I mean, if God didn't care how we live, why is Job on the chopping block? The whole book of Job, the whole saga of the book is Job is a righteous man, but Job would serve God just because he's God, and God derives some benefit from that. So much so that he and the adversary in chapter 1 have this back and forth. But there's more. God has what I'm going to call, go ahead, Andres.
No, I just was going to mention that the creation of the human beings itself shows his love for us in the sense that he really didn't need us before create us, but he was willing to do it. So when he creates Adam in Genesis chapter 1, and when we go to chapter 2, he has care for him, and he put the woman with him to not be alone. So he's showing his care and his love for us, even when he don't need us. So he feels satisfaction in take care of us. He's pleasing with human beings. So he made us.
Here's another thing. God has what I'm going to call, and there's some of this, and we'll look at the passages in the Old Testament. God has what I'm going to call a divine reputation, a divine reputation in the heavenly realm. What is a reputation?
Well, it is what other people think or say about it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the definition. It's not what's true about you necessarily or what you think about you. Your reputation is what other people say about you. And God has a divine reputation in the heavenly realm. And the way we live will affect that reputation. And so God does care how we live. Let me show you some of this. Look at Exodus 32. Exodus 32 is the golden calf incident with Moses and Aaron and the boys. You remember that? Aaron and company are down there having a fellowship meal, but no fellowship. You know, they're doing everything else, and they're doing what they want, and God gets angry, and Moses comes down from the mountain, throws the 2 tablets of stone that God wrote the law on with his own finger, and God's about to consume and destroy these people. Look at Exodus 32:11 and how Moses leans on the divine reputation of God. Verse 11, Moses implored the Lord his God and said, "O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people who you brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent did he bring them out to kill them in the mountains and consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and relent from this disaster against your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and all this land I have promised I will give to your offspring, and they will inherit it forever." And notice verse 14. And the Lord relented from the disaster that he spoke of bringing on his people. Moses says, hey, you don't want the Egyptians to get a bad rap about you and say you couldn't bring your people. You got a reputation out here, God. And God hears that, and God says, you know what? I'm not going to destroy them because of my reputation and because of I don't want the Egyptians to get the wrong idea about me. Does God get a benefit from how we live? Yes.